Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has proposed a 20-point plan for peace with Russia. Now, it outlines security guarantees, which he plans to discuss with US President Donald Trump. Now, what we can tell you is, posting on X, he added a framework for peace must include plans to rebuild Ukraine after the war. He writes, "Today we have had a constructive and in-depth discussion with the American team on one of the three documents we are currently working on, the one on security guarantees. Security guarantees are among the most critical elements for all subsequent steps. That is why it is essential that this document on security guarantees provides concrete answers to what concerns Ukrainians the most, what actions partners will take if Russia decides to launch its aggression again." Now, Caroline Levitt confirmed a US representative will attend peace talks if a deal is on the table.
If there is a real chance of signing a peace agreement, if we feel like those meetings are worthy of someone on the United States' time this weekend, then we will send a representative. The administration has spent more than 30 hours, just in the past couple of weeks, meeting with the Russians and the Ukrainians.
Well, joining me live now to discuss this is University of Sydney political scientist Simon Jackman. Simon, always lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Finally, some progress here. What do you make of it all?
Oh, look, I'm not sure I'm willing to call it progress, to be honest. I think time and time again, we've seen moves like this ultimately just reveal how far apart Russia and Ukraine are. The Donbas remains an immense stumbling block. The plan that was presented to Zelensky by the United States included a repeated element, largely coming from the Russian side, I suspect, that the Donbas be handed over. I think that is such a difficult pill for Zelensky to have to swallow. Hence, this move about, I think, going and getting some legitimacy, or testing the proposition at least, and I suspect Ukrainians will vote overwhelmingly that the Donbas not be ceded away in any negotiation. And I fear that at the end of this, we're going to have another round of this back and forth, this series of proposal and counterproposal, doing nothing other than revealing there are some just truly intractable elements here between the parties. I think it's interesting and worthwhile, and indeed completely understandable from the Ukraine position, that there be a forthright discussion about what security guarantees do look like in a post-conflict scenario. But I still think we are quite a ways from that, given this big intractable issue on territorial concessions to Russia. And the dilemma it puts European partners in as well, that Putin, in effect, is going to be rewarded for his aggression. That what we thought would not happen again in Europe after World War II, that is territorial annexation by means of force, is actually something you can do. We thought you couldn't do that in the post-war order. I think that is just such a big bridge, not just for Ukraine, but for European partners to have to walk over. I'd be really surprised if this is if we're any significantly closer to the end of this than we were, say, 6 months, 12 months ago.
And I mean, Zelensky, as we just heard before, talked about these security guarantees that he needs to see in place before anything was to move ahead, which is more than fair enough. And Simon, the concern here too, if Russia is given certain areas, what precedent that sets now moving forward too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I think, the concern from Brussels and across European capitals more broadly. That again, sort of the what we grew up thinking was true, that violence, interstate violence, being used as a way of growing one's territory, was something that was consigned to the dustbin of history. I think European leaders, the NATO alliance was supposed to put an end to that. The formation of the European Union was supposed to put an end to that. And it is such a fundamental undermining of what many believe to be a tenet, one of the things that make the post-war order, that is a bridge too far, not just for Zelensky, but for European leaders as well. I'd also throw into the mix the Trump administration's national security strategy that was released earlier this week, in which it bears such a, it's a document that would strike someone from 10, 15 years ago as what is going on. The language being used by the United States to talk about Europe. And I think slowly but surely European leaders are figuring out, if they want to preserve what we were just talking about, this post-war order, where states are restrained or enjoined from using violence to expand their territory. It's up to the Europeans now. They're going to have to stand up in a way that I think they can barely contemplate, but I think the penny is starting to drop, that the United States, at least under Donald Trump, has a different view of how the world organizes itself and the United States' role in that. And if the world is to remain in that setting I was just talking about, the post-war order, it's now up to European countries themselves to shoulder a much bigger burden than I think any of them could have even contemplated as recently as 12, 18 months ago.
Simon, I want to get your thoughts on another topic that we're following closely today as well. I mean, the US has seized that Venezuelan oil tanker. We heard earlier from the Venezuelan president, who says it's like a scene out of Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, Trump then says it won't stop here, that land targets are next. What are your concerns, or what are you taking away from this story at the moment?
Oh, I see little incentive or little appetite for de-escalation by the Trump administration. Of course, on the Venezuelan side, it's a classic case of what we call the authoritarian's dilemma. There's no happy ending there for the president of Venezuela. He has backed himself into a corner. There is an opposition leader who we heard from in the package you aired just before the commercial break, a winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, who's standing waiting in the wings and is talking about what will happen when a new regime is brought to bear. Regime change is ultimately, I think, where this is headed. Trump, for various reasons that I think no one really truly understands the complete set of motivations here, but has made this a big priority. And I doubt this ends in anything other than regime change. The question is, again, and it may fall to European partners, it could fall to countries in Latin America to find an exit for the Venezuelan regime so they can get off stage and perhaps get out of the country, a la what we saw in Syria, and paving the way to make what I suspect making regime change, which I expect is where this is headed, less bloody than it might otherwise be.
Okay, Simon Jackman, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you as always.